Hello, everyone. My name is Darby Jones from EF Explore America, and I have the pleasure of overseeing our educational partnerships around the country. I want to welcome all of you, teachers and students and EF staff members from around the country and around the world, to this truly unique and special opportunity to hear from someone profoundly affected by the attacks on September 11th, 2001. That's exactly 21 years ago this Sunday. This is only possible through an incredible partnership we have with the 9/11 Tribute Museum that has already afforded thousands of students who are traveling with EF to meet survivors and first responders on their educational trips while visiting New York and be profoundly impacted by their powerful stories of survival. I want to soon turn this over to our featured speaker for the day, Ann Van Hine. We are so grateful you are here with us today to courageously share your story, in addition to sharing a bit of historical context of that fateful day. For everyone in classrooms and offices or at home, if you haven't already done so, please switch from gallery view to speaker view. And we would love, if you have questions, to type them into the chat or the Q&A. We will try to get to as many of those as we can at the end, time permitting. My wonderful colleague, Sarah Shaban, welcome Sarah, will monitor the chat, facilitate the latter portion of today's program. So with that said, welcome Ann, and over to you.
Thank you. Well, I just want to kind of do the timeline of the day. I appreciate this opportunity to be with you, but I want to make sure you understand the context of my story. September 11th, 2001 was a beautiful day in the city of New York. So many people talk about the color of the sky. There was not a cloud in it. And a little before 8 o'clock, an American Airlines flight would take off from Boston Logan Airport. That plane would be hijacked and it would be eventually flown into the North Tower, Building 1, One World Trade Center. And actually no one above the point of impact would survive the day in that plane. But that building, sorry. When that happened, though, when it was being reported, they were saying it was a small plane because it really was out of our realm of comprehension that terrorists would use a commercial jetliner as a weapon. 17 minutes after that building is hit, a plane is intentionally flown into World Trade Center 2. If we're doing timeline after that happens, then a plane is flown in out of Washington, D.C., is flown into the Pentagon. Then the unthinkable, all of that wasn't unthinkable enough, Building 2 collapses straight down in 10 seconds. A 110-story building becomes about 12 stories. It registers as an earthquake on the Richter scale. The winds are hurricane force. After that, the fourth plane that was hijacked, the brave people on United 93 try to take that plane back. And that plane ends up going into the ground in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And then 102 minutes after being hit, Building 1, the North Tower, collapses the same way, straight down, 10 seconds. They pull no one out alive after Wednesday at about 12 o'clock. Close to 3,000 people died that day. And the world was shocked, right? There was just such confusion and disbelief and just confusion. My personal story is my husband was a New York City firefighter. He was a firefighter in a squad, which is Special Operations Command. So that kind of firehouse does all kinds of stuff. They do confined space and high angle rescues and biochemical stuff. I really comment to people that those are the things you don't tell your wife, that all that's happening. But Bruce was on duty from Sunday, September 9th till Monday, September 10th. Of course, we're talking 2001. And then he was on duty again on September 11th. And because our home was about 50 miles from his firehouse and travel in New York City and that New York, New Jersey area is always slow, we had decided he would spend Monday night out the firehouse. And that was the right choice. It would not have changed anything that happened that day. That day for me was just such a normal day. I took my daughters to school. They went to a small Christian high school. Emily was a senior. Megan was a freshman. I dropped them off. I stopped by my dancing school. At the time, I was a small business owner and owned a ballet school. I taught little girls ballet. And I'll have to tell you, I was very excited that day because I didn't have to teach. We hadn't started back yet. Bruce was on duty. The girls were at school. And basically, I could do anything I wanted that day. That's not the way the day turned out, but that's the way I thought the day was going. So when I came out of my studio from checking on messages, I got in my car, all excited to drive home. And the radio came on and they announced that a small plane had hit the World Trade Center. And I have to say, my reaction was, what kind of dingling was that? It's such a tall building. How did you not see it? But immediately they announced that another plane has hit. So now, at the time, for years, I couldn't have told you what time that was, but it had to be about 5 after 9 that I heard this report. And so I actually put the car back into park and I sat there a few minutes and listened, like, what is happening, trying to figure it out. I decided to drive the 45 minutes home because my kids went to school near where my small business was. And as I started driving home, the fire department issued a total recall, which means they said for all firefighters to report for duty. I knew that the fire department had never done that before in the history of the fire department. And so obviously I was very concerned. My faith is very important to me. So I started to pray. When I got home, I put the TV on and I saw the images that I'm sure your grandparents definitely saw, your parents probably saw it as well. And just disbelief and confusion. And then I did try to call my parents. Greenwood Lake, to where my parents lived, was only about 27 miles. The phone calls would not go through. I mean, this was a time before there were iPhones. You know, people had cell phones, but they were for making phone calls, they weren't smartphones. And I tried to call my parents, and this recording came on saying, all lines are busy, all circuits are busy, please try again later. So I thought I would call my sister. She lived up in the Albany, New York area. I tried to call her and the same message, all circuits are busy, please try again later. And then I hung up the phone, and then the weird thing is my phone rang. And it was actually my sister from California calling to say, you know, is Bruce on duty? You know, like, what's happening? Because she knew, everybody knew, right? It was all over the news. And we chatted for a couple of minutes and I hung up from her. I would eventually go pick my daughters up at school. We'd visit my parents, you know, just trying to sort out what's going on and touch base with family. And, you know, is my brother flying? Is my brother-in-law flying? Like, who do I know that's in jeopardy here? Around midnight, the fire department would come to my home to tell me that Bruce was unaccounted for. And my daughters and I embarked on a journey that we never expected to be on. We've had a personal loss in the midst of a national, and it's not incorrect to say international tragedy. And there's no handbook, really. There's nothing to tell you how to do that. Because my faith is very important to me, I leaned heavily on that. And my family and friends. And I, through those days and weeks and months, had a phenomenal support system. We would go into the city on September 18th. There was a meeting for fire department families. The governor was there, the mayor was there, the head of the department, the medical examiner. And basically that meeting was to say that they were going from rescue to recovery, which meant the big equipment was coming in. And that was their way of saying they didn't expect to find anyone alive. Up until that point, firefighters had been arriving on my doorstep, bringing me bagels and saying, oh, we're going to find them. There's voids. We know we're going to find them. And, after there have been earthquakes around the world, they have found people days, weeks later, because there are voids. But the way those buildings collapsed and the fires, there weren't those kind of survivors. After that meeting, I sat my daughters down and I said, where do you think Daddy is right now? And they said heaven, because as I mentioned before, our faith is important to us. And I said, well, Daddy's in heaven, then we need to have a memorial service. So on September 29th, 2001, we had a memorial service that was attended by many, many people. And actually, when the firefighters walked into the church, we didn't have it in our home church because I didn't want my kids going into that church where Bruce's service had been every Sunday. So we had it at a different church that had meaning to us. But as the firefighters started filing in, people started clapping. And I will always remember that sound because people were just so amazed by what all the first responders had done at that time. And the look on the firefighters' faces, you could see they were humbled by it, and they were tired, and they were trying to find their friends. They were just really in shock. On Monday, October 1st, 2001, we started what we called our new normal. And that meant we put one foot in front of the other, and the girls went back to school, and I went back to teaching ballet. And we would hear from the fire department constantly, and people mailed us notes and letters just addressed to the family of firefighter Van Hine, Greenwood Lake, New York, no zip code. And I have to say, all those things really meant a lot to us. We felt surrounded by people that cared and wanted to take care of us. And then in March of 2002, I would have a phone call telling me that Bruce's body had been found and asking me if I wanted to go to the site to watch his body be carried out. And I said no, because there are some images I cannot have in my head. I am not brave. And I was very careful about what my kids saw and what I saw. People tell me their 9/11 stories all the time, and I just feel like a keeper of those stories. But they always say, oh yeah, for days we sat and watched television. And to be honest with you, the TV in our home was off because it was just too painful with the not knowing what's going on, and then not false, but unsubstantiated reports on that. We just turned the TV off and then would turn it on every now and then to glimpse, get a sense of what was happening. Since 9/11, both of my girls have graduated from high school. They've graduated from college. They have fallen in love. They have gotten married. And my one daughter has 3 kids. So I always thought my grandma name would be Grammy, but my grandma name is Mom, which is an unusual grandma name. But really, it doesn't matter what you call your grandparents, just call them. I, in 2006, started volunteering with the 9/11 Tribute Museum. And I have to tell you, it's been the most amazing experience of my life. Because when I started volunteering, I only had my story. And that was enough. But now I have this, I know and keep the stories of survivors and downtown residents and other family members and first responders and recovery workers. And I really think about the story of September 11th as being like a mosaic. A mosaic is a piece of art that has all these little pieces. They don't connect like a puzzle, but you need all those pieces. You need all those stories to paint a picture of what happened to New York as a city, New York as a state, and to the United States and the world. I was going to tell you something else and it went right out of my head. That's what happens when you get old. But really, I also would encourage you to volunteer in whatever field is interesting to you, because that's how I met. Because I volunteered and other people volunteered at Tribute. That's how I met all those people I never would have met. And they are a big part of my life now. And that's part of what makes September 11th almost a little harder now, because I don't just have my loss. I know the stories of my friends and what they went through that day, and the people that were there that saw things no human being should see, and the first responders that tried so hard. And I think as a nation, in our different tragedies, that we do a good job taking care of the family members, but I'm not really sure that we do a great job taking care of survivors and making sure we listen to their stories and know that they're going through something that goes on for years. I mean, I think about the doctors and the nurses that were at the hospitals waiting for victims to show up, and there weren't that many victims. It's just, to me, the whole story just like ripples out, because the effect of what happened at that site affected this group and this group and this group. And it's kind of like that, through the pandemic, through all different things, that I really think we need to just, hold each other up, and remembering is important, but treating each other well every day is just as important. That's why I wear this bracelet, Pay It Forward 9/11. And that's what I'm trying to do, is pay it forward, because so many kindnesses were shown to me during the most terrible time in my life. But through my faith, through friends and family, and the tremendous brotherhood of the FDNY, I can sit here and talk to you today, and that is very exciting for me. There is a quote, which I don't know exactly, but it says something to the effect that people don't know they're living through history when it's being made. And my husband's death is part of a line that'll be in your history book, where it says 343 firefighters were killed on 9/11. Just to tell you Bruce's story of that day, they'd be sent to the Trade Center. I always knew he would be there that day because of the kind of firefighter he was. They would go into Building 2, come across injured civilians, and start to bring those civilians down. And he would be killed in the collapse. And I didn't know that, like what had actually happened in his day till about 6 months later. But I'm grateful that I know, because for me, the why was my husband killed on September 11th is because my husband was a New York City firefighter and he was doing his job. And that's a whole different thing if your why is that terrorists flew a plane into a building. That's a whole different level. And yeah, so I think I used my 20 minutes.
Thank you, Ann. What a beautiful analogy with speaking about this as a mosaic of everybody's different stories. It's such a terrible thing, but it's brought together so many people in a shared experience. It was very different for everyone, but to have one another collectively as a whole to help you all, stay connected and supported is really an amazing thing. That was really great. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, absolutely. It's like we said, we were talking about this earlier today, but a lot of the students here and around the country, weren't alive for this. So to be able to hear perspective firsthand about what happened and how people are affected that day is so important. And we're really fortunate to be able to do that through the Tribute Museum and with volunteers like you. I want to remind everyone that you can ask questions in the chat. So please don't be shy, put some in there. I do have a couple questions I'd love to ask you with the last few minutes that we have.
Great.
I'm curious, so everyone goes about their lives one way for a very long time and you kind of settle in, but something like the events of 9/11 really change everything. And for you, especially with how your family was impacted. And I'm curious, how do you view the world differently after those events, and kind of what everyone experienced together from that?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. It took me a few years to realize that I actually will never see September 11th the way, and for lack of a better term, your average American does, right? Because I see it through these other lenses first. So I see it through the first lens I see it through is as a FDNY widow, right? So that way. And then I see it through, because my faith is so important to me, I see it through that lens. But to see it as just, oh, my nation has been attacked, is like further down the line. I don't know, does that make sense? And it's interesting because my mom, I was born in England, but my mom was really born in England. She grew up there. And she often commented, because she grew up during World War II, that Americans, and she was talking continental United States, didn't know what it was like to have your homeland attacked, because she grew up as a kid, and I heard these stories all the time, with bombs falling, right? And that Americans, yes, we have gone off to war and helped other nations, but we had not been attacked, except obviously at Pearl Harbor. And she just said, she didn't never said that again after September 11th. And she was, grieved that our nation had been attacked. But, you realize the different perspectives people have by what their background story is. Like my mom, every time the fire thing went off in town, she was sure it was an air raid. And so as a kid, I grew up with that. Now, the part that I didn't get as a kid was World War II, because I'm old. World War II had only ended about 10 years before I was born. But in my mind, World War II was as long ago as the Revolutionary War, which is the way some of our students may think of 9/11. That happened about the same time as 1776. Because I really think anything that happens before you're born, you think that is so long ago, but it's not. The people alive are still experiencing it. So that's just been an interesting thing I've learned from working, doing this stuff at Tribute. And it's become fascinating for me, because I'm like, wow, that wasn't that long ago, right? So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, oh my gosh, absolutely. It is truly so interesting. And I remember that too. You felt so safe at home that all of a sudden it's like, oh, this can happen here. It's
Yeah. Well, they
crazy.
say that's what shocked the world, that if that could happen in America, that could happen anywhere. And I did hear, a discussion. I got to speak at Harvard last year. I'm not quite sure how that happened. Part of a panel, and but they were saying that part of the whole thing was with bin Laden was the fact that he was trying to gain position within all those terrorist groups. And if he could pull off something in America, then his position would go up, which is a whole other thing, the whole political end of it. But that to me was like, whoa, that kind of helps, it puts a different perspective on it, right? We need to learn all this, and understand.
Yeah, amazing. Such a great point. I'm curious, we just have a couple of minutes left, but I'm curious, with that and everything that you've sort of brought to light and shared today, like, is there any specific advice or lessons learned that you might want students listening now to walk away with, and, having such different perspectives and seeing this as history, is there any lesson that you'd want them to take away from today?
Well, the one thing I always say when I talk to students is, first of all, we have to fly. So don't worry about the whole airplane safety thing, because if we stop flying places, there's some places you can't get unless you fly there, right? Like it just takes so long, like you couldn't get there. So, the TSA and everything have done better at making planes safe, secure. So don't worry about that. But just the main thing that when you hear something on the news and whatever, those are real people that's happening to. And when you look at those events, sometimes first of all, it is so overwhelming. But after 9/11, people took the time to get get Bruce's name out of the newspaper and mail me a card. They reached out. And that's what we did as a nation after 9/11. Everybody wanted to do something. And some people sent cards, and some people went down there to what they were calling ground zero at the site and tried to dig for people. And other people stood on the West Side Highway and waved banners and handed out water. And in all of these things that happen, whether it's a hurricane or a shooting or a terrorist attack, there's something we can do. And it might be the littlest thing, but it could become the biggest thing to the person who you did it for. And I think that they can all do that. I mean, some of the most precious things I got were pictures drawn by 5-year-olds and, you know, bracelets beaded by 15-year-olds. And we can all do that. And you know what? Cherish your friends. And the best thing you can ever do for somebody is just sit and listen and let them tell their story. That's the best thing we can do for somebody. So thank you for doing that for me.
I was just going to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to be able to do that with you.
Yeah, see? Two-way street.
Yeah, that is wonderful, wonderful advice. You have such amazing perspective, and honestly, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your story with us and all of your thoughts on it. It's been really great, and I hope that everybody has enjoyed it as much as I know I have. I want to see Darby if you have anything to add as well.
Yeah, I just echo that sentiment completely. And thank you so much. You've helped make this commemoration just be real for all of us and have given a voice to people like Bruce who no longer have one. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone at home and in classrooms around the country for joining. A brief survey will pop up at the end of the presentation. So please just take a moment to give us your feedback. We would love that. And thank you again. Thanks to everyone.
Wow, thank you. Thank you both. Everybody be well and take care of each other.
You too. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you, Ann. Thanks, Darby.